The phone rang, that obnoxious jingle from some ancient ringtone I forgot existed, and I just let it go. It rang again. And again. Finally, I grabbed it, not even looking at the screen. It was one of those cheap corded phones, the kind that had been sitting on the counter for years, gathering dust. The plastic was worn smooth in spots from countless hands. I could practically feel the grime on my fingertips. Yeah? Aiden? It's me. My sister. Of course. It had to be her. The jingle stopped, leaving a buzzing silence in its wake that felt more irritating than the noise itself. I heard her take a small breath on the other end. The kind of breath people take when they're about to deliver something they've rehearsed. What do you want? I asked. My voice was drier than it needed to be. It scraped against the back of my throat. I imagined it as a piece of sandpaper, rough and unwilling to yield. Just calling. Seeing how you are. The words were laid out carefully, like fragile china. I'm fine. My default setting. The one that usually shut down conversations before they could even start. Right. Fine. A beat of silence. I could almost hear her chewing on her lip, trying to decide how to proceed. Look, I was talking to Mom yesterday and she was worried. About you. About, you know. About what? I kept my tone flat, refusing to give her any purchase. About you being out there. Alone. Without us. The silence stretched, thick and cloying, like the smell of overripe fruit. I could almost taste it, a sickly sweet decay that settled on my tongue. It was the kind of silence that forces you to fill it, to acknowledge its presence. It was like being trapped in a small, stuffy room with someone you actively disliked. You really still think that? I finally said, the words heavy with a weariness that had nothing to do with lack of sleep. Well, Aiden, you've always been sensitive. And we've always looked out for you. So, yeah. It's just a concern. She said concern like it was a fluffy kitten she was cradling. A concern. Right. A concern born of years of them deciding what was best for me, what I could and couldn't handle. I remembered walking out of their house that last time. The door slamming shut behind me with a finality that vibrated in my bones. It was a Tuesday. Or maybe Wednesday. I'd packed one bag, mostly sweaters, and a worn copy of that sci-fi novel I reread every few years. The sky was this bruised purple, the kind that makes you think a storm's coming. I just kept walking. No bus, no taxi. Just walking. The rhythm of my feet on the pavement was the only sound for a long time. A steady drumbeat against the growing unease in my chest. It's funny you say that, I said, my voice a low rumble. I was leaning against the kitchen counter, the cool laminate a small comfort. Because I was just thinking about you guys. Oh yeah? What about us? She chirped, oblivious. The change in her tone was almost comical. It was the sound of someone bracing for criticism, but ready to deflect it with practiced ease. Just that you were right. About me needing you. I let that sink in. I could practically feel her posture stiffen on the other end of the line. Her breath hitched. Aiden, we didn't mean, no, you were totally spot on. I cut her off, my voice gaining a little momentum. I mean, look at me. Still living in that shoebox apartment. Still eating ramen noodles. Still trying to figure out how to pay the electric bill. I was painting a picture, a vivid, pathetic smear of my early days. The smell of cheap detergent was strong in that apartment then. It reminded me of my grandma's laundry room, except hers smelled like lavender and hope. This place smelled like desperation and stale air. Oh, Aiden, I'm so sorry. We really should, don't be. It's my fault. I just never had the grit, you know? The smarts to make it on my own. Always relied on you guys to bail me out. I was good at this. Really good. I could feel the words twisting and turning, shaping the narrative to my advantage. It was a skill I'd honed out of necessity, I guess. Or maybe just boredom. She was practically vibrating with sympathy on the other end. You could practically hear her rearranging her entire emotional landscape to accommodate my supposed failure. The faint rustling of fabric suggested she was pacing, her concern growing with every second. We always knew you'd struggle, honey. It's hard to watch. Yeah, it is. I let that hang there. The silence this time was different, pregnant with unspoken judgment and pity. I imagined her looking out a window, her brow furrowed. So, you know what I did? What, Aiden? Her voice was softer now, laced with a tentative hope that I might be opening up. I decided to prove you all wrong. A tiny pause. Prove us wrong? About what? About me never making it without you. About me being too sensitive. To whatever it is you think I am. I could almost see the wheels turning in her head, trying to reconcile this new information with the old script. I could hear her shifting her weight, the tiny rustle of fabric. Aiden, we just care, I know you care. And I appreciate it. I really do. I paused, letting the sincerity, or whatever it was, land. So I packed my bags. Again. And I went somewhere else. Somewhere I didn't know a soul. And I started from scratch. This was the part where I could have gone into the whole story. The months of scraping by, the endless applications, the rejections that felt like tiny paper cuts. The way my left knee started aching every time it rained, a dull throb that was impossible to ignore. But what's the point? It was all just noise, background static to the main event. You left? She asked, her voice suddenly sharp. The pampered kitten was gone, replaced by a wary predator. Yeah. A while back. Didn't think you'd notice, honestly. I imagined her standing still now, her eyes wide. Notice? Aiden, where did you go? I decided to skip the part where I'd accidentally set fire to a tea towel making toast and almost burned down my first shared house. That felt like an irrelevant detail anyway. The smell of burning fabric had been unpleasant, but the ensuing panic had been far worse. And honestly, a little embarrassing. That's not important right now. What's important is that I'm not that person anymore. The one who needs you to hold his hand. I took a deep breath. The air in my loft always smelled faintly of citrus from the cleaning products I used. It was a clean smell, a deliberate contrast to the musty odor of my old apartment. But, your job? Your apartment? She was clinging to the familiar. Different. Everything's different. You know how it is. You say something, and you mean it, but then you say it again. And suddenly it feels like a lie, or worse, like something you wish were true so badly you've convinced yourself it is. The words themselves had a power, a way of shaping reality if you just repeated them enough. So, what? You're just fine? I'm not just fine. I'm good. Like, really good. I walked over to the window, the polished concrete floor cool beneath my bare feet. Sunlight streamed through the enormous windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The coffee on the counter smelled like the expensive kind I used to only dream about. It was a rich, dark aroma that promised a good start to the day. That's great, Aiden. I'm happy for you. Really. The sincerity in her voice sounded a little strained. Like a poorly tuned instrument. The high notes were off, the vibrato shaky. Thanks. So. Anything else? No. I guess not. Just, call us sometime. Yeah. Maybe. I hung up. The silence in the loft was profound. It wasn't an empty silence, but a full one, filled with the hum of the city outside and the quiet workings of my own life. I walked over to the window and looked out. The city stretched out beneath me, a sprawling, indifferent beast. I saw a woman walking a tiny dog, the leash held at an awkward angle. The dog was sniffing a lamppost with intense concentration. I wondered what it was trying to communicate to the world. I won. Anyway. The screen on my laptop flickered to life, displaying an unread message. From my lawyer. It was a PDF attachment. I didn't open it. I was suddenly very hungry. The sun was starting to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the polished concrete floor. I needed to call the dentist about that nagging toothache. It had been bothering me for weeks. I walked into the kitchen, the aroma of expensive coffee still a pleasant ghost in the air. I opened the fridge. A half-empty carton of milk. A single wilting piece of lettuce. Some questionable-looking leftovers from a week ago. Not exactly the bounty I'd painted for my sister. Still, it was mine. All mine. I decided to make some instant noodles. The cheap kind. It was a small rebellion. A way of staying grounded in the reality I'd constructed, even if it wasn't quite as shiny as the version I'd sold. The kettle hissed to life, its steam fogging up the windowpane, momentarily obscuring the sprawling city. The water boiled, a frantic, sputtering sound. I poured it over the noodles, the dry flakes slowly softening, releasing their familiar, artificial chicken scent. I sat at the small table, the one I'd bought at a flea market, and ate. The plastic fork scraped against the ceramic bowl. It was a sound I knew well. A sound of survival. Of making do. I thought about my sister again. She was probably already telling Mom about our conversation, embellishing my struggles, my triumphs. They meant well, I knew. But well-meaning people could be the most suffocating. I finished the noodles, the last slurp echoing in the quiet loft. I ran the bowl under the tap, the water gurgling down the drain. I looked at the PDF on my laptop again. Maybe later. For now, I just wanted to sit. To feel the silence. To be here. In this space I had carved out for myself. The shadows deepened outside. The city lights began to twinkle, a million little promises in the growing darkness. I closed my eyes for a moment, just breathing. The air was still, carrying the faint scent of citrus and something else. Something I couldn't quite place. Something new. I stood up and walked back to the window. The woman with the tiny dog was gone. The street below was quieter now. I could hear the distant wail of a siren, a mournful sound that seemed to cut through the stillness. It was just another sound in the symphony of the city. Just another reminder that life went on, in all its messy, unpredictable glory. I needed to get some groceries. That was the next step. A trip to the market. A chance to fill the fridge with actual food. A chance to plan my next move, whatever that might be. The possibilities felt vast, stretching out before me like the cityscape. I picked up my keys from the counter, the metal cool against my palm. The jingle of them was a small, sharp sound. A sound of purpose. I needed to remember to buy more of that expensive coffee. And maybe some actual ramen, the kind you cook with broth. I opened the apartment door, the click of the lock a small punctuation mark. The hallway was dimly lit, smelling faintly of old paint and forgotten meals. I stepped out, leaving the quiet hum of the loft behind me. The air in the hallway was cooler, stale. I closed the door, the sound muffled and soft. Back in my loft, the laptop screen glowed, the unread message from my lawyer a dark rectangle against the light. I ignored it. The hunger pangs had subsided, replaced by a dull ache in my stomach. The kind of ache that came from too much thinking and not enough living. Or maybe just not enough food. I walked over to the bookshelf. My eyes scanned the spines. That worn copy of the sci-fi novel. I hadn't touched it in months. Maybe tonight. Maybe it was time to revisit old friends. Or maybe not. The city lights outside seemed to pulse, a gentle, rhythmic beat. I could hear the faint murmur of traffic, a constant, low thrum. It was a sound I'd grown accustomed to, a soundtrack to my solitary existence. I decided to make tea. A simple chamomile. Something to soothe the frayed edges of my nerves. The kettle whistled, a high, shrill sound that cut through the silence. I Poured the hot water over the tea bag, watching the amber liquid bloom. The steam rose, carrying a faint, calming scent. I sat down on the couch, the worn fabric soft beneath me. I held the warm mug in my hands, letting the heat seep into my fingers. The silence in the loft was a comforting presence now. It was the silence of a space claimed, a life built. I took a sip of the tea. It was slightly bitter, but pleasant. A small comfort. A moment of peace. I thought about my sister again. And Mom. They were still out there, living their lives, worrying about me. It was a strange kind of connection, forged in shared history and a persistent, if misguided, affection. I finished the tea, the mug empty. I set it down on the coffee table. The laptop screen was still glowing. The unread message from my lawyer. I still hadn't opened it. Maybe I would. Maybe I wouldn't. It didn't really matter right now. What mattered was this. This moment. This quiet. This feeling of being here. The city lights twinkled. The siren wailed in the distance, a little fainter now. I closed my eyes again, and just listened. The sounds of the night. The sounds of my life. I opened my eyes. The laptop screen was still there. The unread message. I reached out and clicked on it. The PDF opened. My lawyer's name. A bold title, settlement offer. I scrolled down. Numbers. Figures. A life in digits. I leaned back on the couch, the mug still warm in my hands. The city lights blurred slightly. I took a deep breath. I won. Anyway.